What do you get when you take people dedicated to their craft, going through leaps and bounds, acting on their plan of action even in the midst of adversity? You get a heartfelt story so organic and becoming so genuine, which forces you to be a part of their moment, joining these experiences as if you were a part of them. These are stories of people, just like you and I, reflecting from within on how they've used adversity to catapult their lifestyle, their vision, and their goals to becoming successful. Here at the Stories to Savor Network, we welcome you to this wonderful, heartfelt show entitled Reflections from Inside. So the next time you go through trials and tribulations, or having self-doubt, consider to let the stories resonate with you in hopes to inspire you to believe that you can do whatever you set your mind to do.
She is an intuitive life coach and a public speaker, recently featured in a TEDx talk. She wrote a 6-time award-winning book that's not only an Amazon bestseller, but it sparked a global movement in 18 countries and counting. It brings me great pleasure to welcome my next guest, author of Epic Sexy You, Morgan Field. Morgan, welcome to the show.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so glad to have you. I read the book and wow, it's powerful. There's a lot of information in there. So I thought before we talk about the book, let's talk about what the journey was that brought you here.
It's one of those things where I feel like one day I just kind of started to wake up, right? Like it was one of those things. It was like living in darkness, but not realizing that I was in darkness.
Sure.
And feeling like this question that kept coming up over and over again was, there's gotta be more.
Yeah.
It was like a whisper.
Almost like sleepwalking through life.
Yeah, but having no idea that that was happening.
Right.
Like Groundhog's Day,
right.
Repeating over and over and over, and just constantly feeling and hearing this little whisper, this can't be all there is.
Sure.
There's got to be more to life.
Right.
And for me, my journey really was one of those things where I was following a path that I thought was going to lead me to happiness and fulfillment and love and light.
Right.
And so I spent years sacrificing those things.
Right.
Right? Like I'll get there when.
Yeah.
I'll be able to experience what I want life to be like when I do A, B, C, D, E, F, G and get all the way through the entire alphabet.
Because that's the formula for you to get there, right? The formula to success is to do all these things in a certain order, and then you'll have that happiness you're seeking.
Yeah, and one of the things I talk about in the TED Talk that I did was the fact that the path I was on was from the subliminal messages that I received from growing up or just society and the world we live in was go to high school. Okay. You graduate high school, you go to college, so you get your education, and then you find some sort of mountain and you climb it. And so the mountain I climbed was the corporate ladder.
Wow, right. As we all do, right?
Yeah, and we all have some path that we're on that isn't ours. If we're
Right.
really honest with ourselves, we're all on some path that maybe our parents encourage us into, or our friends, they're doing something and so we're doing it too, or we see someone else and they look happy, so we're following that thinking that'll lead me to
get me
happiness.
there.
Yeah, and I remember waking up at the top of the mountain. I got to the top. I was making $250,000 a year. I was so excited.
Dream salary. We all would want that. No matter how we get there, we all want 250 grand.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've arrived. It felt amazing. I was completely ignited and elated. And I was like, I've made it. I had no debt. My car was paid off. I had a gorgeous condo. And those were the things that I thought that was the there.
And anyone else outside looking in would say, she did make it, she's living the life, and I want to be her.
And I thought that too.
Right, yeah.
I was like, I am who I always wanted to be. That's what I thought. I was like, oh my God, I became her.
I'm here, I've arrived.
And I felt amazing for 2 days.
For 2 days?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
And so after about 2 days and it started feeling fleeting, I was like, oh, I don't have this right.
So you felt it almost instantly, you finally got where you wanted to be, and you felt like for 2 days you were on top of the world,
Yeah.
and then you just knew. Was there anything specific? I mean, did anything generate inside of you that made you realize, like, this is not what I want to do? Was it an instant change,
It was one of those things where when you arrive there and it feels how you thought it was going to feel,
Yeah.
and then after about 2 days, the only thing I could relate it to is like when you're a kid and you get a toy and it's amazing, and then 2 days later you're kind of bored.
Right. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if you're chasing it there,
Yeah.
if you believe that you have to achieve or attain or get something
Right.
in order to be able to receive
Yes.
happiness or fulfillment, then you're actually trading life and years and time for illusionary moments of fleeting fulfillment. But I didn't consciously realize that was happening.
Yeah.
So when I looked up, it was almost like having tunnel vision on a goal for 6 years,
Okay.
which is really common. I see people do it all the time.
Yes, yes.
And then I arrived and I'm at the top of the mountain. I'm taking a look around at the scenery.
Yeah.
And I'm 35 pounds overweight,
Okay.
constantly in and out of pretty toxic relationships.
Okay.
Or even if they weren't toxic, they were emotionally unavailable individuals that I was choosing. My career was number one,
Okay.
right? And so if I'm looking back now, even I can see even the relationships that I was in or my relationships with my family, they weren't what I wanted them to be because I sacrificed my body, my friendships, my relationships. I sacrificed everything for this one goal.
Which
because
was to
I thought
climb
that's
this ladder.
Yeah, and I thought that it was all going to be worth it because then once I got there, everything would be amazing. But I got there and I looked around and I was like, this is not living.
Right.
And it forced me to redefine, or rather to ask myself to redefine what success means. What does living mean? I had
Sure.
never asked myself that question.
So some of the not so healthy behaviors or things that you were doing, you thought, well, when I get here, all those things will get corrected. I can lose the weight because I'll have 250 grand to work with. I'll find the best boyfriend in the world because I'm making 250 grand who's not going to want me. And everything was kind of centered around getting to that goal.
To me, success at the time, without realizing it, was
Yeah.
money. It was being debt-free.
Right.
It was having a gorgeous
Right.
space to live in. It was, I thought financial freedom was freedom.
Sure, I get that.
But what I started to consciously question was, how did I feel about me? And at the time, I had just turned 30.
Okay.
And so I was pretty young for
Yeah.
being in a position of making the amount of money that I was making.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I started to take a look at the missing piece of the equation of my life was, how do I feel?
And do you think that was really what the trigger was? You're there for 2 days and you're going, this just doesn't feel the way I expected it to feel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, so then I started saying, well, how do I want to feel?
Yeah.
And instead of waiting 6 more years,
Which I think most of us would probably do. If we landed that 250,000, I'm not sure that I'd want to, roll the dice and leave that comfort zone and take a risk,
Yeah.
right?
yeah, well, to me, the moment that I realized that I had sacrificed 6 years for 2 days of momentary
Yeah.
fulfillment, there was no turning back. Like, there was no way that I was going to sacrifice any more time. And so I started to ask myself, what are the things that I could do to be happy now?
Okay.
What would my life need to be like? Who do I need to be in order for me to get to experience feeling and being happy continuously, as opposed to waiting more years to do it? And I started to look around at people in my circle to actually see and feel that was a pretty common pattern where we're waiting to be happy when.
Oh, okay. So you were even surrounded around people who had similar goals and a similar perspective.
Well, I mean, think about it. When
Yeah.
when you're climbing a ladder,
Yeah.
you're surrounded by other people, or whatever the mountain it is, you're surrounded by other people who are doing similar stuff.
Right.
Right? I mean, I worked 18-hour work days. I would skip lunch. I
Yeah.
was traveling. I was gone some days some weeks I would be gone 4 days a week from my home, right? So like I was constantly doing happy hours with clients or happy hours with, you know, the company. And so it was one of those things, like that's what I was surrounded. That was the normal.
And we were conditioned to believe that if you're not doing that, then you're not successful.
Well, and also at the company, it was, you weren't a team player. You weren't committed.
Oh, yes.
And I wanted the promotions because that's when I was going to get my happiness and fulfillment. And so once I realized that the promised land of fulfillment was an illusion, it allowed me to say, okay, how do I want to consciously define success? Because the current definition of money and, you know, financial freedom would equal happiness. That wasn't actually.
So you really just took a moment and asked yourself, I'm now here, I made it, but how does this make me feel?
Yeah.
So Morgan, if you were to share with someone you've just met how to identify that they may be in that same spot of unhappiness, what's the one thing we can do to kind of figure that out?
It is so important to slow down.
Yeah.
It is, our instincts tell us, speed up, keep going, do more.
Right.
Our intuition, our heart tells us, slow down, check in with you. The head, speed, heart, slow down, right? And so giving yourself permission to stop and pause and ask yourself, how do you feel about the journey you're on?
Right.
Is this really what you want?
Right.
And the question that I ask myself now that I offer to others is, how much time do you spend loving being you? Because to me, that is my new definition of success. And so consciously exploring what your definition of success is, and is it serving you in getting to be happy now? Or is it something that is creating you to always be happy when?
Right, when you've gotten to that place. Yeah, so you talk a little bit in your book about functioning from head space versus heart space. So it sounds like that's kind of where we need to go in order to determine our happiness, right? So when we return, we're going to talk a little bit more with Morgan about what it means to operate from your head space versus your heart space and where we really should be laying in.